Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you to everyone online, especially thank you. This is our first of the year, although sort of not the first because the year hasn't even started, but we are having an off-sequence one because we're really in luck to have Dr. Aussie Mokryn come in. I wanted to make some joke about how she's not a real Aussie because she's awesome, but okay, that got the laughs it deserved.
Yes.
But she's a senior lecturer in the Department of Information Systems at the University of Haifa, and does, as you see, a lot of really interesting work in computational visualization methods for absences in data, but goes much more than that, and also really sort of is very interested in the complex human data hub type things of the interaction between our technologies and our cognition and our
This is absolutely true. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have the lab for social AI and networks, and these are all things that I do. So for social, what we do is a lot of human AI interactions, and I look at how people and use AI for ideation and for design. And we are also looking at human AI decision making under stress, which interestingly moves away from explainable to situational awareness, but this is something completely different, but it's fascinating. I will talk about absences and the method, computational method that I developed, which is learning via surprisability based on information science. And I'm also working a lot on emotions. And I showed that I can find from reviews of films, if I mind the emotions, how the film made people feel. And then we can use that in many ways. And I'm also doing a lot of temporal networks, network science. Okay, so we're into absences. And we all know, I think, the Sherlock Holmes story about that dog that didn't bark, but yet Holmes really needed to explain that. The dog did nothing in the nighttime. And then he was asked, so what's the problem with that? And I said, that's the curious incidence. And Kahneman notes also that people construct coherent stories from available cues and tend to ignore what is missing unless it is made salient. So I will show later that absence is meaningful only against expectations, and we will sort of try to break this down. So there's the presence bias. This is the systematic tendency to detect, learn, and reason from things that are present more readily than from things that are absent. And in little kids and even in animals, we know that it's easy to associate A and B, and there's no association for A and not B. And there is search asymmetry. It was noted in little kids that they're very easy to spot things that are more and things that are strong, features that get stronger, but they really take some time, or they don't even notice when something gets missing, is absent. And it's in vision, I think it's called search asymmetry, where targets with added or exaggerated features are easily detected, while those with reduced or typical. Okay. So absences require expectations, and I'm not sure how many. But I will tell you a story. We see here the map that the English created in around 1942 when they were fighting the Germans, and planes were not coming back. And they tried to understand where to put armors. And they kept on. And it took Wald, a Hungarian mathematician that was there, escaped Hungary, and told them, well, probably our expectation would be expectations of places where when planes are shot, they're being taken down. And once they did put armor on these places, more planes came back safely. So without anticipating a feature, we cannot register its lack. And recognizing absence requires prior expectations. And even, in our body, we have predictive models, and we do respond when something violates our models, right? So this is the same. We need to have predictive models. And I think that the body, we do recognize absences, but for some reason, we didn't put it in our models. And the question is, how do we create the models? How do we create the expectations? And for that, we need to have some sort of reference framing to provide cognitive substance for absence detection. Now, what sorts of base rate do we need? What's our base rate, and how do we create the so not sure how to pronounce the name of the German researcher, Gigerenzer. So Tversky and Kahneman believe that, Jack is a 45-year-old man. He's married and has 4 children. He's generally conservative, careful, and ambitious. He showed no interest in political or social issues and spent most of his free time on his many hobbies, which include home carpentry, sailing, and mathematical puzzles. Now, the mathematical puzzles biased towards engineering, and is Jack more likely to be an engineer or a lawyer? And they gave base rates. Kahneman and Tversky, they gave 70%, they gave percentages. So one time they said that 70% of the populations are engineers. The other time they said 70% of the population are lawyers, and they let people decide with Jack is an engineer or lawyer, and most people were, were fooled and disregarded the base rate and said, well, Jack is an engineer. And here come Gigerenzer. I will I will make it work by the end of talking about this slide, the end of the time looking. So he was saying that and he showed that if you give people the actual numbers, maybe people are frequentists. If you give people the actual numbers and say 70 out of 100, every 100, 70 are engineers or 70 are lawyers, people would take the base rates into consideration. Also, another thing that he showed that was very interesting, that if you let people create the base rates on their own using examples, they're much better at understanding them than if you just give them the aggregation. So if you give them a few samples with numbers, and then they create the expectation, they're very good at understanding that this is the base rate. I don't know, regardless of the talk, I don't know if you know, but Gigerenzer just published, I saw that on LinkedIn, a very interesting account of his encounters with Kahneman Tversky. Apparently, Tversky was sort of a more agitated and didn't want to discuss much, but Kahneman invited him several times to give talks. Then Kahneman would talk for 10 minutes, and then Gigerenzer would talk for 5 minutes in return. And that's very, I think, very nice of Kahneman to sort of accommodate and give space to somebody who's saying, hey, you're wrong. That was very interesting to read, and I recommend that. Going back to my talk, so what Gigerenzer says is that we need to have people create the expectation using examples, and then they understand base rates well. So this is exactly what we were trying to understand in the first research that I'll show. We will give people concrete examples, partial references, and also an expectation and aggregated reference, and we'll see whether they detect absences. And just to make sure this fails, and the experiment is the following. We had 3 real data sets. So we put 3 brackets in and energy. And the idea would be to show examples or to show world distribution or to show other examples of countries and show one specific country. What do you see there? What's unique about it? What's different about that? Right? We'll have partial reference and global reference. And the partial reference would be on the left, and the aggregated would be on the right. So this is an example of the regime type. So we'll show 3 examples, and then we'll ask about E1. And in the aggregated, this is an example from gas, energy resources. We'll show the world distribution, and we'll show E1 and ask about E1. So these are the 2 settings. And each person saw all 3 data sets in the framing that we gave them. And the spontaneous would be, how does E1 compare to the visualization? So we didn't say, so we'll have the same sentence. And then when they'll finish all 3 of them in either of their partial or aggregated, we'll take them to the prompted and we'll guided one, what appears missing or notably minimal in E1. So same visualizations, only different framings. And here are the results with the energy. People were really good at differentiating even in the spontaneous. They were able to differentiate on their own on the partial reference much better than the overall. People were better at finding things on the partial reference as we predicted, but it was only significant here. And of course, once we guided them, it was insignificant. The difference was insignificant. So prompting effect was amazing. I mean, 40% detected abscess before, and then once guided, 90% detected. And I want to show you that there were 10% who really declined seeing abscesses. So I'll guide you through some answers. And in the guided, we asked what is missing. Data labels, explanation of terms, and overall population numbers, or nothing appears to be missing. Okay. So the theoretical contribution is that absence detection requires comparing observations against expectations, and partial references encourage active expectation construction. Guided prompting, of course, shifts from the automatic to the deliberate processing, probably. It's interesting. yes, he said, claims that in this memoir that this is very chauvinistic, like using, talking about 60, 70 years ago women, and it was very interesting reading. I really recommend. And there are design implications. We need to make expectations explicit through comparative structures and use progressive disclosure as much as we can. And before I explain how we find about the missing or the absent features, I want to give another example, and then through that we will go. So we have the DISCO framework, which we took that to recommending hotels. So when you go to recommend to hotels recommendations, you want sometimes the LLM to just summarize all the reviews for you and get you summarization. So we did two types of summarizations. One with the LLM just giving us the entire summarization of the reviews. And the other one is through a process where we first identified all the topics in hotels in the area, created the expectations, and identified what was missing and incorporated that into the summarization. The framework is something like that. We take the reviews, we do aspect and sentiment extraction, we do the analysis, which learning via surprisability, which enables us to identify things that are more or things that are missing. And we create a summary generation from that. In a very short introduction to learning via surprisability, we can think about every review for, let's say I aggregated all reviews for each hotel. So every one of these is an aggregated document for hotel. And I take the word frequencies in each of them. And this is what I have here, word frequencies for all the reviews of each hotel or the topics or whatever. I create a domain level topic distribution. And then for each hotel, I compare the topic distribution within the hotel to the overall topic distribution. And I identify using information science, which are over or under represented or missing. For example, here are the topics that we found for one hotel. So you see that proximity, city center, positive is non-existent. And it's very, very common. Otherwise we wouldn't have found it as missing here. So missing, this is something that needs to be said. So absences are only popular features, otherwise popular features. And we see here proximity to beach positive is missing, but in-room facility positive is very high. So we use that. And then the summaries would be something along these lines. So the upper one is the LLM without the LVS and expectations and what is missing. So, you know, service only a single comment flagged an unfriendly manager. So several impressions are overwhelmingly positive. So it really talks about what exists in the reviews. While this one, let me read it. Guests praise the friendly, helpful staff, cozy atmosphere, comfortable beds, and the on-site restaurant. Blah, blah, blah. Sorry, I'm going to the missing. Noise is rarely mentioned, unlike neighboring hotels or on busy streets, suggesting a quiet stay. But several features commonly praised elsewhere: bathroom quality, breakfast variety, mountain views, public transport, proximity, and design are seldom discussed here. Mountain views, when noted, were sometimes a disappointment. So that gives a more, so we held a user study with 270 participants across 3 domains, ski, beach, and city center. Each viewed baseline and disco summaries and rated them on 5 dimensions: relevance, detail, decision support, persuasiveness, and ease of understanding. Sure. So sequentially, half got the first as, so we randomly, so half will get the other one first. Yeah. Thank you. Overall, it was pretty much the same, except for the ski, where they overwhelmingly like the disco. Probably in ski slopes, some the details are more important. And for detail, they really liked the disco and for helpfulness and decision support. Harder to understand. It's could be. We did get a note, somebody said it was not easy understanding the details of the absence. Didn't say absence, but it was worthwhile, and I'm happy I did it. And yeah, people actually reacted even emotionally sometimes. I wanted to have a follow-up research on that, but I got voted down by my colleagues saying that's not that interesting. So user feedback was preferred baseline, more to the point and easier to read, and preferred disco, more detailed and honest, mentions negatives as well as positives. Sure, yeah.
Wondering if you could, did the LLM summary generally do a good job at picking out the things that were like the most surprising and stuff to talk about, or did it say everything? Because I'm wondering about the trade-off of detail or not, like in terms of what it mentioned that was not there. Was it just everything, or did it usually pick out the most important ones, or yeah?
It's so a lot of the work that I'm doing now with people in recommender systems, actually, people do not take intensity. Algorithm models that people use do not take intensity. We try to give it intensity. I'm not sure how much. There's a lot of, the fine tuning doesn't really help a lot. So I'm not sure, but it seems like it did take them, and we sort of took the top, right? So we gave it the top. Out of the top, if it mentioned just as well, just as strongly, something that was extremely missing or something that was slightly missing, I agree with you. Yeah. And I see that in many places where people don't think that intensity, and I think intensity is really important. Yeah. So the discourse summaries were more informative, require more cognitive effort, and design for absence requires balancing insights with readability. Okay. So learning via surprisability transformation, I'm going to go into that a little bit more. People who really like computational. I'm not going into too many details. I have that at the end of my talk. If everybody wants the slides, I can give them, and it's in the papers. So the idea is to use the data set to represent members of the data set data points. And we created data set representation, which is a center. You can create it either by aggregation or by creating the average value per feature across the data set. And then every data point is represented by how it differs from this created center. So how the distribution of features within it is different from the center distribution. And I use surprisability, and I will explain in a second why. And you can think about it as taking a lower dimensional data set and projecting it into a higher dimensional data set. Let's say we're taking vocabularies of people, right? Writings, and we take vocabulary. Of course, the overall vocabulary of the population is very, very large, and personal vocabularies would be smaller. But what we're looking for is not the very long tail of rare words that people use, but I want to see things that are different. So the TF-IDF, the things that are more than in the population. But then I'm also looking at words that are very, very common in the population and are somehow missing or underrepresented. So, and this is, let me give you another example. You all know the book Robinson Crusoe, right? So we look at the book as the population. So we look at word frequencies, and we look at the book as the population. And now we see each chapter as a data point in the as a document in that population. So etc. And even Friday is a popular. And chapter 16, Friday arrives. And interestingly, the signature, the words that are most different in how they're in their use in that chapter compared to the entire book, which contains this chapter. Of course, Friday doesn't stop talking about Friday. I think this is what really contributed to the frequency there, because it arrives only in chapter 16, right? Friday arrives only in chapter, right? And then talks about the sheep and Spaniard and his father as usual, but doesn't talk about the captain and doesn't talk about his mind, doesn't talk about his condition, and doesn't talk about the days that he has. So you have company, and then these are the things that you talk about less. And chapter 20, so this is unsupervised. These are the terms that came up. And then supposed to be a spiritual journey. So, yeah. So that should give some sort of an explanation of the method, but I'll try to explain it a bit more. So missing commonalities features, that popular features that are absent from or underrepresented in a data point, for example, in a document. And how I did it, I looked at the per feature divergence. So we have but what you see here is so people look at it as a divergence. It's not distance, but divergence. But this is actually a sum of how each data point is different across the two, the data point and the center that I created. And if you can see here, it will give the largest values will be for things that change scales. So this is what it finds. If I take the top elements that contribute to the divergence, I find the elements that changed scales. So overrepresented or absent, or popular terms that are absent or under. And this is the feature surprisability that I find for each feature. This is what I find for each feature. It's feature surprisability. And only then at the end, I look if it's more or less than in the population, and this is how I give it the sign. And I'm gonna run over some applications that we did. when I started with it, I played only with words. I looked at it as word distribution, and I was intrigued by that. And then we did a lot of things with words. For example, and interestingly, so Jane Austen is very similar to herself. So I created a population and then saw how each one differs from the population and compared the difference. So this is something that is elusive, and I need to explain. When I'm comparing signatures, I compare how two authors differ from the center. I don't compare how they are, I compare how they differ. This is what I compare. And interestingly, I can tell you that we found overwhelmingly that even in social media, every author, a style is denoted by some absent popular term. Okay? So Emma is different, and the project is quite similar to themselves and to Jane Austen, though they claim they're not. So we took it to look at impersonation detection in social media, and I will also go through political messaging and online influence attack. So we wanted to show that the signature is an attribute of an individual. And the way we did the experiment is like authorship attribution in the wild that people use on social media. So I used the IMDb data set. And it's very interesting because these are people writing reviews for different films. So you would expect it to be different, but they have their styles. And first, I didn't put it here, but what I did is I made sure that when I sample the population and I compare it to real users, there is a real difference. So it's significant. People are different than just sampling the population. And now I took 1,000 users, each authoring at least 30 reviews. And I took 10 of the users and I split the account by half. So now I have 1,000. See if I can identify the person whose account I split. So similar signatures would belong to the same author, and I compared it to TF-IDF. So this is average minus, so take the average distance among them, average minus one standard deviation. I would say they are the same author. Here is when I said that average minus 2 standard deviation are the same author. And if they're as close as average minus 3 standard deviation, this is what I would say that they're the same author. And you can see that that's amazingly correct. It seems like it's a missing dynamic that we just needed to see. And when we did it on IMDb, free with standard average minus 3 standard deviations, we found 1,500. And when we sampled, some of them we didn't even try to conceal. Yeah. So this was found only from how their text was different from the population. Okay. I didn't want to overwhelm, so I'm going now to political messaging. Yes. So we did it, this is what we did here with the TF-IDF. This is a TF-IDF. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So I take probability distribution, and then the the missings would be things that are at the head of the distribution that otherwise they're not missing, right? Because this is interestingly, and I can talk about it. So it all goes back to this Kohlberg-Leiber KLD from 100 years old, 80 years ago, which is very Bayesian. And if you look at it, what we did is I look at the data set as in the expectation. And then it only finds, interestingly, really, when you break it down and you take on the summation, it really finds that the elements that move scales. So if it's at the tail of the population, this will take it down, right? And so I removed, so you can, I tried everything, I have to tell you. I tried with stop words, with adjectives, without them. It's the same. It's in the paper. We played with everything. There is someone, I forgot his name, from Bohr. I'm sorry. It's in 2001, he suggested to take only the stop words of formulas and create a baseline of how they are and if it's more or less. And that was very smart. But I think I found him only after I finished everything, and then we found him. But we do it in general for a lot of data sets. And I will move on because I think there is something really interesting that you would like to see here. Let me get to there. Okay, so interestingly, I took 230 State of the Union addresses of American presidents. And these are different people with different styles. And what I compared here are the signatures. So I compared here how they different from an overall center that I created for that timeline. And interestingly, you can find point of change where there are wars and stuff like that. Just before World War I, we found an interesting, you don't see that, but it's really light. In 1913, we found an interesting change point. And the term was in the signature. So we looked it up on Wikipedia, and apparently that was the first time that they gave it orally. So they were standing up tonight and tonight and tonight. So when they much less than usual talking about law, public, and government. And in 51, I think everything here moved a little bit. So I made it bigger, and I didn't move the walls. Well, I'm sorry. And in 51, it's free and Soviet. Here, so you can take different periods. And here we took only the last, we did it in 2000. We took it from 1992 to 2022. So here Bush is different than Clinton, talking about 9/11, talking about the war in Iraq, right? Very different from himself of every year, but I will just let you see. So these are the signatures based on the 30-year-old list. Some interesting things. Clinton, child. Interestingly, the word is not here, Obama. Obama was talking about health plan. Stop talking about Democrats are talking about jobs. Here is Bush, and this is his final when he left. So interestingly, the word may is the 10th most popular word in these speeches. And I think that people say that they may do that, or I don't know, this is something they use to talk about the future. We may, I don't know. And it's busy. Right? And also actually Biden's. So it's very interesting to see the different terms that come up in political messaging. And I think that if we know what people and political parties do not talk about, that would be very interesting. As you see here, what I have for each feature is how much it differs from the population in the logarithmic used computed by Jensen Shannon. And if I sum all of these up, I can find the most fluctuating features in a data set very easily. So fluctuating that much, unless you know this is one of the 10 most fluctuating terms. Very, very popular. This is popularity. Currently, government is a very, very fluctuating term as well. And this is child only for the last 30 years. So even Bush used it more than Obama. And I want to finish with online manipulation. So Russian attack on Ukraine, we were able to obtain almost 60 million tweets from lots of fascinating thing about it. And if you think about an attack, something like that, this is a crisis. And in crisis, people are afraid, people are angry, and we're more reactive, right? We don't have as much cognitive bandwidth as we usually do. And this is the best time to go for an influence attack. We identified one. I'm sorry, something is, okay. I'm sorry about that. This is the repetitive, the truth illusion by repeating. So repetitive repetition builds familiarity, and we can see that they only talk about join, expansion, expand, alliance, membership, and zone, fly zone. So they were promoting the Russian narrative. When you have it, it's very important not to use otherwise popular terms because you want to shift the conversation. So you don't say, no, Russia didn't attack Ukraine because you just say NATO is expanding and you avoid all the stuff that the others are talking about. Okay. And for fun, since we can do it with whatever we wanted, we did it with the music, Spotify in 2017. So we created the world listening habits for music, and then we saw each country, we found its signature, and then we compared signature, we created the metrics that PCA on that matrix, and you can see all this Spanish. Portugal and Brazil, which these countries listen to popular music, and you find Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, and Cyprus over there. So what do I mean popular music? Popular music, that means that they will be without a style. They will be very similar to the center distribution. So they will listen to the popular music, to the head of the distribution. And we did the same for bodily tissues. So we took B cells and we were able to find different, the gut parts were similar to each other. And interestingly, the spleen, where the immune system is starting, is very similar to the entire body. And we did it for several people. And with that, I will finish to give time for questions and discussions. I have plenty of more slides if you want to see more examples, but I think I don't want to overwhelm. Thank you. I would love to hear it. I think absolutely, and I believe that not as good sufficient enough for that, but I believe that it can be used to identify noise from signal, because if something moves scale, that's a signal. If it moves within the scale, it will be only additive. It will not change the KLD distance that much. I believe that KLD can be used to identify noise and signal. But that requires me getting into sounds much more than I can. But in a way, if you think about it, Shannon said, let's take string coding and coding sign. I'm saying, let's take the center of the data set, move it to the other side, code it, move it to the other side, and then transmit only the features that change scales. And that would be enough to identify each point in the data set. But that's beyond my capabilities. I would like to collaborate with that if anyone is feeling sure.
Yeah. So the thing about big reigning issue of AI detection, having used an AI as an author, and I know most of the.
Oh, I didn't. I have that. I have that. I tried it.
Did you try that?
Yes, I did. Yes. I have that in another slide. In another presentation, I didn't put it in, but let me take it up. I think it's here. So we did a work with fan fiction, and right. So one vocabulary was created from real stories created up until 2020 by fan fiction people. Another was created by the top terms of stories that my student created based on some prompts. Which is which? May I give you a hint? A little hint. Ah, sorry. What did I do? Here. Yeah. That. And as you can see, it's the I didn't take out the stop words, and it was really telling. And we did it also for Harry Potter. But as I said, we're working now on sort of, so I have a hypothesis that as people use these tools more and more, and I'm very much in favor of using tools. For me, that was a game changer because I'm not a born English speaker, and it enables me to communicate better and be able to be more polite, or even tap into some tradition or culture that I lack, being bald Israeli. But but I hypothesize that as people are using more and more LLMs, the grade, the readability would improve. So they would use less and less jargon. And this is something that we are checking now. If in science communicating, because we have, when we talk, we sort of think about the audience that we talk to, and we have expectations. These expectations make us use jargon. LLMs do not have these expectations. They expect to talk to the entire population, so they sort of lower the increase readability, lower the jargon level. And as people use LLMs more and more, I think that even in scientific writings, we will see that more and more. Yeah. So yeah, sure. So that would explain perfectly why in the ski area, it was very important to people to know the negatives, while in the city, less so, I think, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, there was just one last question, if we have one. You can find the distribution. So what I found is that KLD divergence, if you break it down, it goes down like a parallel. So you can find the most, the terms that are more distinctive. And within them, there will always be one that is missing. More than that, if nothing is missing, you can be sure that most of them would be positive and only a few would be missing. But the missing is an important dynamics that is crucial for finding. Let's say I found person on, this is a real example, on IMDb, and they really love Sean Connery and Bond and Pokemon and all. So there are a lot of people who would love that. But that specific person also didn't like humor and comedy and drama. So, I mean, most of the things, there were like 15 things he did like more, or she did like more, they liked more than others. But I think this is very common. But when you add the missing, that becomes what is distinct. The combination is what comes distinctive. And this is the partial dynamics that is, I think, missing. And we saw that also in biology, and you see that. Thank you. Thank you very much.